Hi, this is Carl the Cobra Frutch, and you're watching Lights Out.
This is Faisal Khan for Lights Out, proudly sponsored by Spartans Law. And I'm delighted to be joined by Brandon Flawless Gonzalez, all the way from Sacramento, California, in the United States of America. Brandon, good evening to good afternoon. How you doing, my man?
Good, my man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. It's the pleasure is all ours. Brandon, obviously, let's just talk a bit about yourself. I know you retired many years ago, and I know now that you running your own boxing gym, doing a bit of YouTube as well, just like we do.
Yeah.
I've been watching interviews lately. I watched Kell Brook's interview with Boxing King Media. Shout out to Boxing King Media. He talked about the struggles of what it was like to sort of retire from boxing. Tyson Fury's openly admitted that leaving boxing is not an easy thing to do. But from your side, I mean, what's it been like for you since you retired all the way back in was 2014, I believe?
Yeah, it's been quite a few years now. And originally, as far as from the training aspect goes, I literally had to stop boxing, make myself stop training probably for 2 months, which is the longest layoff I've ever had since I started boxing. Because what happened was I knew I wasn't competing anymore, but I was still training. And every time I got into training, it kind of like, hey, I can still do this, or it reignited that spark uh, to start trying to compete again. And so to stop, I just stepped away from boxing totally for about 2 months of training. Even though I was still at my gym running the day-to-day operations, still around it, I just physically I had to stop training and find other ways to, for fitness. So that was what I had to do physically. And then I think mentally over time, I just got more comfortable with the decision to stop competing and just focus on the other things that I had going. I had a nonprofit where we focus on youth in our community, and then as well as the boxing gym. So it's definitely a process. It's definitely a struggle for something that you've been doing for so long. You dedicated a large part of your life to. But yeah, so it's definitely a process.
Well, it's been 8 years now, and obviously life's changed a lot for you. As I mentioned, you're running your own gym. You're doing YouTube tutorial, boxing training videos. It's good to see that you're still in the boxing world in some sort of capacity, and I can tell via your social media accounts you're very active online as well. But surely there's a part of you that misses that thrill you get of as a boxer. I don't know, perhaps like entering a fight week or going face off with your opponent or being part of press conferences. Is there any part of you that misses that right now, Brandon?
For sure, especially the competitive side of me. But I know what it takes to be at that level, right? To be at the level, to the dedication and the commitment that it takes, and being where I'm at now, it just I understand it, right? I understand it for the position that I'm in now versus probably 2, 3, 4 years ago. It's probably a little bit different. It was a little bit harder. The urge to get back in the ring and even spar and do things like that was still there. But I don't want to disrespect the game and not be able to dedicate what I know needs to be done to compete at a high level. And so, again, it's understanding, and then over time, it's a process.
Well, as I mentioned, there's a number of fighters that have left the boxing world as of late. Kell Brook, Tyson Fury sort of come out of retirement, fought last weekend, and they openly admitted it, just how difficult it is to walk away from boxing. Now, what would your message be to them in terms of how to sort of progress life after boxing?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think it's going to be different for everybody. What I did, I knew so. I just started focusing on the other things that I had going on, and those just happened to be still part of the game. I don't know if that made it a little easier for me because I was still working, training kids. I was still working with fighters. I was still around boxing, going to fights, being around fighters. So I don't know if that made my transition easier. I think it's going to be different for everybody. But I think, like they said, when you retire from anything, is to have a hobby, have something else to take up your time, take up your mind, and kind of focus on that. And that's what I did. I built up Flawless Boxing, which is our boxing gym, and then our nonprofit where we do a lot of work in the community, Flawless for Youth. And I really just went full steam ahead on those. And then other opportunities that I would turn down or push to the side because of my career. So I really just started doubling, tripling down on all of those.
Well, I have to say massive credit to yourself for not only sort of staying in the boxing world, but I respect anybody that wants to work with the youth and work with young kids, especially with, not just the trouble we get in the UK, but you hear about violence in the US as well. It's really good to hear that you're working with the younger generation, hopefully setting them on the right path.
For sure.
One thing about the sport of boxing is there's so much to talk about, and boxing right now, I mean, there's probably 15 to 30 amazing fights you could pick right now that we're hopefully going to get to see at some point in 2023. But talk to me a bit about the current boxing world. What have you made of how the sport is progressing? And do you believe that 2023 is going to be the year where we get a Spence versus Crawford, a Tank versus Garcia, or a Fury versus Usyk? Are you confident that 2023 is better than 2022?
Yeah, I think we're going to see some real good fights this year. I think there's already talks about the Davis Garcia fight. I think that I'm probably most excited about the ones that are talked about right now, besides the Crawford and Spence. But that one looks less likely more and more as time goes on. So I think the Garcia and Davis is a big fight. I think we're going to see a lot of big fights. I think the pressure from the media and the public, I don't know if you want to call it that, towards certain big fights happening. I think the fighters are kind of stepping up and taking the initiative to make the fights happen. Sort of like when you had Floyd and Pacquiao, like they contacted each other directly to kind of start putting things in motion. So yeah, I think a lot of the fighters now have more control over their career. When you look at someone like Devin Haney, even Terrence Crawford or Tyson Fury, a lot of these guys play a major, make in the decision making of their career. So I think that's becoming more of a trend with more and more fighters, especially high profile fighters. So I think we are going to see some of those big fights happen next year.
You've been in boxing a very, very long time. I know you know what it's kind of like when it comes to negotiating fights, making fights. Now, just like myself, I'm pretty sure you've followed Spence and Crawford throughout their careers, two magnificent fighters. For me, two of the best pound for pound fighters in the world right now. And if I had to pick one of my top three fights for next year, that would be one of the fights I really want to see. Now, given by what you've seen on social media, we've seen Terence Crawford post a long video on his social media accounts. We've heard Errol Spence fire back on social media. Why do you think that fight hasn't happened yet?
It's hard to tell because we're not really privy to a lot of negotiations that go on behind the scenes. We only hear what we hear in the media, and even some of that is subjective or biased. So it's really hard to tell. It looks like Terrence Crawford was kind of getting his house in order. He had the split with Top Rank. It looks like he was starting to handle a little bit more of his own career. So I don't know why the fight didn't happen. I think both fighters want it. I think that's a big money fight, and I don't know necessarily if the money was there for that fight to happen. But again, we're not part of the negotiation, so all we're doing is putting pieces together off what we hearsay.
Last time we saw an undisputed heavyweight champion, we'd have to go back to Lennox Lewis. Now, we're just one fight away from an undisputed fight between Fury and Alexander Usyk. Now, Tyson fought last weekend. He beat Derek Chisora quite comfortably. From what you've seen of the Gypsy King, do you look at like the likes of Usyk and Joe Joyce, and do you think that they're capable of beating Tyson Fury, or is Tyson Fury right now, in your opinion, just unbeatable?
Man, that size and that reach and that experience and the things that Tyson Fury possess, I think it's a hard fight for any heavyweight in any era. That's just a lot to overcome. I don't think it's something that we've seen before. A big man that big with that type of movement, and he has a lot of experience too. I do think Usyk can be competitive over the duration of 12 rounds. I don't know if the size factor and the experience is gonna play it in the fight. But I think Usyk is definitely game, and I think he'll put up a great fight against Tyson Fury.
And obviously, there's another heavyweight fight that could potentially take place next year, and that's obviously America's Deontay Wilder versus Andy Ruiz Jr. Now, we've seen Deontay Wilder fight twice under Malik Scott, and a lot of people that I've spoken to as of late still have an interest in perhaps a full fight between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. Now, Deontay Wilder was world champion for a very long time. I'm pretty sure he'd want to be a two-time world champion before he does leave the sport. Have you seen any improvement from Wilder under Malik Scott? And do you think Wilder's capable of becoming a world champion for a second time?
Yeah, I definitely think Wilder will become champion again. Malik Scott is good. He's a good trainer. He's got a good brain trust, got a good boxing IQ. I think they work well together. It seems like Deontay Wilder respects him. He listens to him. So I think that's definitely a good team. And they've only had what, 2 fights together, I think.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you're still building that chemistry. It takes time. So you got 2 training camps together. You're going to get a third one if they get this Ruiz fight. So we'll tell. Will he be able to beat Tyson Fury? That's hard to tell. They had 3 tough fights, and you saw who won the trilogy. So I think that's like I said, that's a tough fight for anybody, but for Deontay Wilder as well. But he's got that knockout power, man. So anything's possible.
Deontay Wilder hasn't shown he's capable of beating Tyson Fury, but he's shown he's more than capable of hurting Tyson Fury. They fought
Yeah.
3. Wilder's knocked him down 4 times. If you was in the Fury camp right now, would you want to avoid a 4th fight knowing that Wilder's, caused the most damage to Fury in those 3 fights? Or would you expect Fury to perhaps entertain a 4th fight if that fight did become an option to both fighters?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of big fights out there. You got Anthony Joshua out there. You got, like you said, Andy Ruiz, Joyce, Usyk. Those are all big fights, and I would watch any of those guys fight each other. I think they're good fights, especially that Anthony Joshua fight. So I think that 4th fight will always be there. You know what I mean? Those guys can, take on some of those other names. I think there's some belts out there too. So yeah, I would love to see Fury mix it up with those other guys, and then maybe come back to Wilder for a 4th fight.
You study boxing, you know the sweet science of boxing. Part of what you do is to train boxers. Now, we saw Anthony Joshua throughout the majority of his career be trained by Rob McCracken, and after the first defeat to Alexander Usyk, he moved over to Robert Garcia. I'm hearing that he's working out in different gyms in the US. When you look at Anthony Joshua and what you've seen throughout his career, what is the best Anthony Joshua? What type of a fighter do you think he should be set up to be as? Do you think he should stick to perhaps being the big puncher that he is, or would you like to see him become more of a technical boxer? What do you think suits Anthony best right now, Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, he's got a heavy task, man. He's got a lot of responsibility because he's still learning, right? He hasn't been in boxing that long, because of his popularity so fast. We ask a lot of him, and he's competing at the highest level, heavyweight, elites. So that's a lot to ask for him, and he's still learning. I think McCracken is a really good trainer. So is Robert Garcia. So settling in with somebody and kind of settling with someone that you trust, I think is going to be a major key for him. And then just drilling and training, man, because at that level, you can't just be a one-trick pony. You got to have multiple options. You got to have multiple facets to your game. So, that's something that's developed over time. And being that he's already at an elite level, you kind of have to already have those tools in your toolbox at this point. So, he's got a tough. He's in a tough spot right now.
I ran a poll on Twitter the other day in regards to Anthony's next move in terms of who should train him. And the majority of the votes went to one of my favorite all-time fighters in Roy Jones Jr. Now, how do you see that relationship linking up if Joshua was to go towards Roy Jones Jr., get trained by him? And also, what have you made of Roy Jones's relationship with Eubank Jr.? Do you think there's been any improvements whilst he's worked with Chris Eubank Jr., Brandon?
I haven't seen Eubank. I didn't know he was working with Roy Jones actually, but it seems like Roy Jones is getting really heavy in the training. I know that he trains a friend of mine, Kevin Newman, who's I believe he's super middleweight, and so Roy's an all-time great, all-time great mind and experience. And I think he articulates himself well enough to pass that on to his fighters. So I think Roy would be an excellent trainer, and even for Anthony Joshua, I think there's probably a lot of respect there for Roy Jones. So I think he would do well with Roy as well.
Well, just one final one before I let you go. As I mentioned, you was a professional boxer many years ago. The sport is growing massively. What would your advice be to not just the guys that are turning pro within the next 6 to 18 months, or what would your advice be to the young kids that are starting off to sort of build towards national championships and the next Olympics? What's your advice to the next generation going into the world of boxing, Brandon?
Yeah, man, you just want to really set a solid foundation at whatever level you're at. Your foundation is going to be the people you surround yourself with, an exceptional trainer that you trust in. It doesn't have to be the best trainer. It's a trainer that you have a good relationship with and that you trust. And that's going to be very important. And then, the people around you, your training partners, the gym you're at, that's going to play a big role in your development. And then the rest is just pretty much up to you. You know what I mean? After you surround yourself with a comfortable team, it's all about the training at that point. The training, the commitment, the sacrifice, all of those things. And then now, of course, the social media component of it as well, man. Really, really focus on those areas. It's not enough just to be really good. You know what I mean? There's a lot of really good guys out there, but you have to do something that separates you from everybody else. And there's a lot of different avenues that you can kind of get your hand in to kind of to make that happen.
Okay, right, Brandon, as part of our appreciation, what we're going to do is we're going to share your social media and your YouTube channel links below in our description. So guys, if you can, please make sure you follow Brandon on social media, hit the like, subscribe button on his YouTube channel. And before we let you go, Brandon, really, really appreciate you coming on. Hopefully we'll get to speak to you again at some point in 2023. And if we hope you have a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year. And once again, thank you very much for your time. A massive...
All right, brother. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for talking to Lights Out.